find that sometimes you lack the necessary motivation to tackle your mending tasks? Like many Check Your Thread listeners, you might be taking part in the Winter of Care and Repair Challenge at the moment, and the zeal you experienced at the beginning might be flagging by this point. But even if you're not participating in that challenge, today I'm bringing you a dose of motivation to help you deal with the broken items that need your love and attention. We'll hear from a bunch of lovely Check Your Thread patrons who have kindly shared what mending they've been up to remind us that we're part of a wider global community of people who are trying to care for our belongings. Some of the items they've been mending will definitely surprise you. So please stick around a few minutes for that. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 16 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me in this journey. Hello, lovely one. Are you doing okay? Thank you so much for choosing to listen to this episode out of all the episodes that you could have clicked on. I really appreciate it and I never take your attention for granted. So happy February! Are you excited to have left January behind? In the Check Your Thread Patreon community, a new month means a new monthly theme to focus some of our sustainability goals on. And this month it's Vegbury. As with all the monthly themes, participation is entirely optional and also very much open to interpretation. Personally, I plan to not eat meat or fish at all for the month, and I'm super excited to swap recipes and food prep tips with the other patrons. So I guess that's my sustainability win for the week, committing to cutting out meat consumption for the whole month ahead. My husband will be joining me, but not the kids, because they are picky enough as it is. Here is another lovely sustainability win related to food from Check Your Thread patron Rinka. Rinka says, do you know about the concept of kraankkost? Sorry if I'm saying that wrong, Rinka. I researched it, but I couldn't find out how you say it. It's spelt Kraamkost. But back to Rinka. It's a Dutch term to describe postpartum food. The idea is you cook a delicious meal for someone who's just had a baby. For my babies, I asked for kraankkost instead of gifts. It was the best. I've just opened the last jar of chicken soup. My baby is 7 months. I felt so nourished and cared for and loved by all the people who gave us their version of comfort food. Big bonus is you get a lot less stuff that you don't need or know what to do with. I've paid it forward yesterday by cooking for my little sister who's just had her baby. I love doing that. How wonderful is that? I'm sure that other countries and families and communities around the globe do something similar, but I love that it's a thing with an actual name. If you know of this type of thing by some other term, please get in touch and let me know. So thanks, Rinka, for sharing that wonderful thing. And also big thanks to Katie and Nikki who signed up to support the podcast via Patreon over the last week. I am so grateful. And speaking of the Check Their Patreon, by the time this episode releases, I will have scheduled both the mending meetups for February, and this month, on the 16th of February, I'm also scheduling a community neck warmer sew-along. All of those take place via Zoom, of course. The neck warmer project is a great opportunity to use up scraps and leftovers of fabric or fabric harvested from unwanted garments. So if you were thinking of signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon, and remember you can do so for literally any amount at all, now is a good time to do that if you like to sew in community. Okay, let's get on with today's episode. So we all have mending to do from time to time, whether that's a sock that needs darning, a bag strap that needs reattaching, or the handle has come off your spatula. Some tasks are more fun than others, but all are super important when your goal is to be a good steward of your belongings. And it's always nice to know that you're not the only person working towards a goal. So I've collated some mini mending stories from some awesome Check Your Thread patrons for you to enjoy. Hopefully they'll provide you with some inspiration and tips on what's possible to mend and how to go about it. But more than anything, it's nice to be reminded that we are part of a wider community of people trying to keep their belongings in use for longer. And we're not alone in a desire to care for the planet through caring for our possessions. Massive thanks to the patrons who kindly submitted their contributions. So until next week, when we'll be talking about vintage fabric with not one but two awesome guests, have a great week. Take care of yourself, your loved ones and your belongings. Get something fixed that's been on your mending pile for way too long. And enjoy! So a while ago, just before the winter of care and repair started up in fact, I put a post up in the Check Your Thread Patreon feed asking people to share 3 things. I asked them to describe a recent successful repair, I asked them what's in your literal or metaphorical mending pile right now, and I asked them a mending related tip that you've picked up or figured out. Let's hear what the people who responded have been up to. A note on pronouns, as you probably already know, I use neutral pronouns when I'm not sure of a person's preference. First up, we have Martin, who's inspiring us with the breadth of types of mending that he's been tackling.
Hi Zoe, this is Martin from Gloucestershire. I wish I'd been more aware of the winter of care and repair before the last pod, because I've just done a load of repairs, both around the house and on some of our garments. I just repaired an old wax jacket that needed some tears fixing, for instance. So I've decided that as I fix things in bursts, like today I fixed the hen house, some lights, a website and some network wiring, I'm going to keep a list with the intent of fixing at least 90 items over winter. And since I ripped my t-shirt this morning, there's my first job.
Doesn't really sound like Martin needs the Winter of Care and Repair challenge to get him motivated to mend, but that's great that it's giving him additional motivation. Martin also created a wonderful printable chart to help him keep track of the actions and mends that he's been undertaking during the challenge, and he kindly shared it with the rest of the Check Your Thread Patreon community, and I've really loved using it and seeing all my own actions fill up. Now we'll hear from Bonnie, who talks us through a very clever repair and shares how you may wish to look at a repair from a really interesting and very personal angle.
Hello Zoe and Check Your Thread listeners. My name is Bonnie and I live in Michigan in the United States. A mending win that I had recently was my husband has this tencel and merino blend knit shirt that he wears all the time, and our dog jumped up and snagged his nails in it and left 5 little holes right near the hem. I normally do very visible mending because normally I'm mending for my children, but that wasn't going to be appropriate for this particular garment. It's something my husband wears all the time and he didn't want a really ostentatious patch on it. It's a beige color, and so I looked through my thread until I found a pretty decent match. And then what I did was actually go over to the scrap bin and find some cotton knit just from an old white t-shirt. And I cut out small circles of that and placed them on the inside of the garment. And then I stitched those into the garment so that the holes were stabilized. And then I stitched the tears themselves down so that they weren't flapping around anymore. But I used very small stitches, and I was careful to keep my tension kind of loose so that it wasn't pulling too much on the knit garment. And the end result was pretty invisible. You really have to be looking for it in order to see it. The holes are stabilized. They're not going to get any larger, but it's also not a patch on the outside of the garment that's really noticeable on the exterior. In my literal mending pile right now is a pair of pants of my son's. He's pretty notorious for tearing out the knees on those, so I have to do a patch on the one side and then some reinforcing with darning on the other side so that it doesn't tear out. And my metaphorical mending pile is a lot of familial relationships, particularly the one with my mother, trying to figure out how we can have a relationship that changes and adapts over the years and allows us the space we need because we're not the same people we were 20 years ago, either one of us. And a mending tip that I've learned over the years is to give yourself permission to be bad at something at first so that you can get better at it. So maybe don't try and mend something that you really need to be invisible at first. Maybe embrace visible mending at the beginning and just give yourself permission that you're learning a new skill and it's going to take time, and just embrace the fact that it's not going to be perfect at first.
That's an awesome takeaway there from Bonnie. Great advice. Next up is a submission from Hannah based in the UK that I'll be reading out. Hannah writes, a recent successful repair I did was on my husband's jeans. I don't know what he does to them. The knees always rip, and the backs of the legs at the heel look like they've been ravaged by a small but persistent dog. I've used some offcuts from his previous jeans that I turned into shorts to patch them up. They look fab, and he prefers them to his newer, to-be-ripped pair. What's in your literal metaphorical mending pile right now? I bought a video tutorial for mending knits and want to spend some time watching that and familiarising myself with the techniques. On the actual mending pile is another pair of my husband's jeans and a t-shirt that I've had for 15 years that I wear for ballet that's ripped under the arm. A mending related tip I figured out is to follow accounts on Instagram who show mending, which is a great way to pick up tips. Also, books. Hannah kindly shared some pics of those cleverly mended jeans, so head to the show notes on the website checkyourthread.com to see those. They really do look good. Next up is Anne from the US, who tested out a fabled repair technique that I've only seen mentioned in books.
Hi, this is Anne from Minnesota in the United States. So successful mending that I've had recently is I've always been fascinated with the 1940s make, do, and mend movement. And so my husband, one of his dress shirts for work, the collar was fraying along the back of the neck. So I unpicked it and flipped the collar so the underside was the top and the top was the underside. And it worked out great, and it was actually really, really easy. In my mending pile right now, I have a tear in our duvet cover, and I also have the fitted sheet for the bed. I have a spot that is starting to tear in a place that I have already mended. I must move my feet a lot in my sleep. My mending tip is you can mend wicker baskets with fabric strips. So I have an old willow laundry basket that my mom has had since the 1960s, and I got it when I got my house in the late 90s, and it was missing large bits of wicker, and I just took strips of kind of thick canvas, threaded it onto a large-eyed yarn needle, and wove it in and out. And the basket is now stable and pieces aren't breaking off. So that is my mending tip. Zoe, I love your podcast and your mission, and please keep doing what you do. Thank you so much.
I love that. I think that wicker baskets are definitely one of those items that most people assume are unfixable when they break. So this is great to know. This one is from Maggie. I recently replaced the zip in my daughter's school bag. She's had that bag for several years, but it's still in good shape. And luckily, I had a zipper in my stash that was the right size. Now it can be used for years to come. My mending pile probably has a wall sock or two. I'm not sure how long to keep repairing these, but I like mixing up colours and using up small bits of yarn. I love the idea of using up little odds and ends of yarn to repair these socks. That sounds like such a win-win to me. Here's Tara with a very unexpected mending win.
Hi Zoe, this is Tara, and I'm coming to you from Washington State in America, and I wanted to share a mending tip that I came across accidentally. It's not really mending, it's more saving from the trash and repurposing something. So in our house, we have a dog, and she likes to excavate squeakers from her toys, which is kind of adorable because she finds where they are and removes the threads and digs them out and then just sets them aside. So they're still functional squeakers. But the toys, on the other hand, get completely destroyed. And it seems like sort of a waste of money for me to buy these adorable little toys that don't last very long and get destroyed and can't really be repaired or reused in any way. So I had some cotton socks that were in my mending bin. And then I also started throwing the dog's little squeakers into that same mending bin. And one day I thought, well, I wonder if I could throw these squeakers into these holey socks and just sort of tie them in knots and use them as dog toys. And so I did it. I would just put a squeaker in the sock, tie a knot, another squeaker, tie a knot. And I would do that as many times as I could. And then I gave it to the dog, and she loves them. She runs around the house with our dirty old socks squeaking. They last much longer than any of the toys. There's no stuffing. I don't have to worry about her ingesting anything she shouldn't or, eating polyester. and I'm saving them from the garbage. And I found that they do wear out after a long while, and then I can just sort of tie new knots and put new squeakers in them, or replace the same squeakers that were in them. She doesn't tend to pull the squeakers out of these socks either, which is kind of cool. So that's my little upcycle, saving it from the garbage tip for today.
And this one is submitted by Bridget. I was about to cut up a favourite pair of pyjamas for dusters, then listened to the Care of Repair episode and thought, what am I thinking of? I unpicked the waistband so I can repair the worn out bits with some scraps of interfacing and replace the now completely non-elasticated elastic. And, well, that's it. I'm a bit ashamed that that's the only mending that needs doing to prevent these poor pyjamas becoming dusters. I don't think you should feel ashamed, Bridget. Turning those PJs into dusters would have been way better than chucking them in the bin. But even better if they can continue to be pyjamas for a bit longer before them becoming dusters. Mending is all about keeping things at their highest level of possible use after all, isn't it? This submission is from Marie, who's currently living in Portugal.
Hi, this is Marie calling from Portugal. I participated in the Winter of Care and Repair last year too. How I approached it was, besides mending items that needed repair, I took time to improve garments that I wasn't wearing as much as I could have been. So even if a garment didn't need fixing, I thought about what would make me wear it more. Could have been a simple alteration like shortening pant legs or dress straps, or more complicated fixes such as adding a pocket to a garment that didn't have any, or even extending those stupid lady pockets that they put in pants that aren't even big enough for anything more than a tube of lipstick. An example of this was a puffy pastel jacket that was so light in color that the cuffs and elbows always looked dirty to me. I got sick of washing it after only a few wearings, so I decided to dye it a darker color. And while I was dyeing it, I also sewed in a piece of scrap ribbon at the neck so I could hang it on a hook. I hope that helps. Thanks, Zoe!
I love the way that Marie is expanding the idea of repair to include reworking garments that aren't seeing much use. There are all sorts of reasons why we might not be wearing a garment as much as we think we should, even though there's nothing broken as such. In fact, that reminds me of an episode I made, which was 5 ways to update unworn me-mades, all of which also apply to shop bought garments too. That was episode 137 if you haven't heard it already. And this was a lovely little submission from Donna with a very useful reminder. Thanks to the challenge, I've finally got round to mending some moth holes in my husband's wool jumper. Why do moths only eat the front? Anyway, despite not having dark navy thread, the black thread repairs are pretty much invisible. So I have 2 theories why moth larvae at least appear to prefer to eat the front of a garment. One is that they might be eating any tiny residues of food that might have dropped onto the garment. The other theory is that when a garment gets folded up to be stored away, it's usually folded so that the front is wrapped up inside it, isn't it? And moths hate light and movement, which they're less likely to be subject to when wrapped up all cosy inside the folded garment. I don't know, but those are my guesses. But great reminder that we can also successfully mend things even if we don't have the exact match of thread or yarn or what have you. Okay, and finally, we have a submission from Hallie, who's living in Ireland. Hallie wrote an enormous message full of wonderful mending tips that she's picked up over the years, and she encouraged me to select some of which to share in this episode. I'm actually going to use some more of it in an episode in the near future. So for this one, I've chosen to include the tips that we haven't mentioned in this or recent episodes, or won't be in one very soon. So here we go. Hallie writes, my definition of mending is anything that makes a piece of clothing or textile better. So beyond repairing rips or holes, threadbare spots or covering or sometimes highlighting stains, it includes lengthening dresses or tops, adding side panels, widening or narrowing necklines, dyeing, eco-printing, and of course adding pockets to clothes which don't have them. 1 or 2 small holes in a tee repaired visibly can look a bit like you've spilled your lunch on yourself, so I like to add some more stitching to the top. But don't get so into the stitching that you forget to look out for the placement. I spent a few sleepless hours happily embroidering a star on a top, only to have to painstakingly unpick it all the next day. It would have been great to mark the breast apex for a pattern drafting though. Don't cut hand knits unless you're absolutely positive it's what you want to do. I've done this twice and regretted it, though I should have learned after the first mistake and just unravelled and reknit. If something's felted, it's different, of course, and in that case, I treat it like a sewn garment. I started with a long-sleeved man's tee from a charity shop to practice adding side panels to tops to make them fit better. My first efforts were a bit wonky, but they're great as PJ tops. As I actually started measuring carefully for adding gussets, I did some sweatshirts this way and it's very satisfying. Old leggings, I have a box of old leggings and tights that I was sure shouldn't just go to landfill. Hi Dave. They make great side panels down your leggings, and leftover knit fabrics obviously are good too. I've also added bands to the bottom of 2 old cropped tees my daughter gave me, and these turned out to be real favourites. I just finished adding a band to the bottom of a really nice tencel dress of my daughter's. It took quite a few bastings of folded fabric to choose what hung best and was the best colour match to the sweaters that she usually wore with it, but it was well worth it. I had a few nice viscose tees I bought when I thought viscose was a sustainable fabric, which have stretched over the years, despite being careful with laundering. I've cut off the bottoms to straighten the hem, and my favourite thing is a small pleat or tuck in the neckline to bring it in. I usually do some stitching on top to hold it down and for decoration, and then add some more stitching randomly just for fun. What's on my mending pile is a horrifying number of tees, woven tops, undies, socks, sweaters, joggers, trousers, and old garments that are going to be upcycled or refashioned in some manner, plus 4 sheets that belonged to my grandparents, which are over 60 years old. The sheets are fast approaching more patched than original and seem to be in need of more repair every time they're used, but also make me very happy. Overall, what I think I've learned is that making your clothes or other textile items last also makes you love them more. 15, even 20-year-old fast fashion tees or leggings would seem like trash to most people and certainly shouldn't be dumped in charity shops. But when that shrunken pilled tee makes the perfect coloured patch or gusset for another unused garment so you can happily wear it, it's the best kind of magic. And what a beautiful way to wrap up this episode. I really hope it gave you both tips and motivation to crack on with your own mending, so you too can enjoy some of that magic very soon. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!